Be nice to the younger version of you. Be incredibly kind. Welcome back. Heck. Hold on. Welcome back to TaviiTalks. Today's video is near and dear to my heart because, hold on, I'm sitting in my chair and it sounds like I'm farting, but I promise I'm not. It's just the way my chair is rubbing. Anyways, focus. Today's video means a lot to me because it's something that I've been having to work on within myself. Be nice to the younger version of you. Be incredibly kind. I've seen so many different examples of this on Pinterest throughout the past year. I saw one where it said every version of yourself was necessary, so don't have shame basically for who you are. I saw another Pinterest that said something to the effect of be kind to yourself for not knowing what only time could teach you, but really the root of it is you were doing the best you could at that time with the information and patterns and resources that you had at that time. And so when you're able to reflect back on things that you've done and it feels uncomfortable and it feels silly or like frustrating, why did I do that? I wish I didn't do that. That literally just means that you've grown. It means you've grown past that decision and it no longer represents who you are in the present, which is a good thing. But I feel that we have to be very cautious about the way in which we reflect and the way in which we look back and even talk about our past selves. So the first thing is about acknowledging. It is important to acknowledge when you made a decision that didn't reflect your highest self, that you feel like maybe brought harm to you, brought harm to someone else. And with that, malicious intent does not need to be present for harm to be caused. So it's important to acknowledge you might not have meant to hurt someone else, but you could have. There are plenty of situations from my past where I didn't intend to hurt someone's feelings. I didn't intend to be dismissive. I didn't intend to be male-centered. I didn't intend to be, I don't know, any example you can think of, rude or having an attitude, but I still did it and it still may have caused harm to that person. So I don't get to tell people from my past, well, I didn't mean to, or, well, that wasn't my intention. That doesn't matter. The harm was caused. So I have to acknowledge that. And you can acknowledge that you brought harm to someone else, whether emotionally, mentally, verbally. I've never been in a fight, so I guess physically, if that's ever happened to you. You can acknowledge that you did those things without it becoming you're a terrible person. You know, it doesn't have to swoop all the way to the other extreme. So it is important to acknowledge the decisions that you did when you were younger that you wouldn't necessarily repeat now, or that no longer feel aligned to who you are now. Accountability does not equate to shame or guilt. You don't have to feel guilty or shameful of what you did in order to take accountability. In fact, there was a pastor from a church that I was previously a member of who said shame and guilt are devices of the devil. And so even if you're not a religious person or a Christian, just kind of zooming out and thinking about shame and guilt are designed to put you in a cycle of acknowledging that you did something and then beating yourself up about it. And you just keep looping of, oh, I can't believe I did that. Oh, I'm a terrible person. I can't believe I did that. I'm a terrible person. And you just keep going and you never learn or trace back why, so you continue to make the same thing, the same decisions or similar decisions, and then you feel even more guilt and even more shame because you're repeating the same patterns. And that's happened to me before. Acknowledgement is not enough. Knowing that you do something is not going to be enough to repeat it from happening. You have to be able to acknowledge what you did, and then we then have to figure out, okay, what did I do? Why did I do it? What triggers happened before I made this choice? What was I feeling in my body before I made this decision, before I yelled at this person, before I cut someone off in traffic, before I got too drunk at the club? What was the trigger? Because our minds are the most powerful place. Everything is up here. Everything is up here. So yes, I'm a big fan of taking accountability, and that for me could look like, okay, I know that I shouldn't have done, let's see, what's an example? I'll use Pepper as an example. If I know that I'm feeling particularly irritable and I get frustrated and yell at Pepper, I have to acknowledge that yelling at her and projecting my energy onto her is unfair to her. I have to take accountability and say that's not something that I should do. And then I have to understand, okay, why was I feeling irritated? What decisions could I have made alternatively instead of just getting to the point where I yelled at her? And then I'm able to kind of change the way I look at the situation. And then I can create new patterns for the future of, okay, if I know that I'm starting to have a headache, I probably need to just ask Pepper to lay down, or I need to remove myself so that way her excitement and energy isn't negatively impacting what I'm already feeling. So you have to be able to acknowledge, take accountability, and also look at patterns and see what triggers or things are leading up to the actions or choices that you aren't loving. Language is really important. I've said this in a couple different videos, but I genuinely didn't know how male-centered I was. I was always kind of boy crazy. The first crush I ever had was probably when I was like 5 or 6. First, it was B5. It was Brian from B5. Really thought I was gonna marry him. First, yeah, it was Brian from B5, and then there was this boy at my church. I've always been boy crazy. Granted, obviously, a lot of that is connected to stuff in my childhood, you know, issues with my dad, issues with my mom, but nonetheless, the context makes sense. But the behaviors and patterns of behaviors that were forming because of the male-centeredness, I was causing harm to myself. I was causing harm to my friends, and like potentially putting us sometimes in dangerous situations by trying to seek male validation. There were men from my past that I was very dismissive of because I was uncomfortable with receiving love. I got so used to kind of chasing it, and that became a part of it, that the few, I don't know, it's kind of only one time, but like the one person that I feel like genuinely was showing me love right off the bat, I treated him the worst. And I had to kind of reflect back and acknowledge the harm that I caused, and it didn't feel great. I felt like a terrible person. When I reflected back on some of those experiences of, wow, I was so focused on getting male validation and trying to get them to see me that I wasn't being present in really cool moments and memories with my friends. the language that I use when referring to myself, at first, it was like, oh, I'm so stupid, or like, I'm so desperate, I'm so this, I'm so that. But none of that is helpful, because that version of me was only trying to fill a void that happened as a result of my childhood. So it's like, how can I be mad at the younger version of me for just trying to survive and operating in a survival cycle? So I can take accountability and say, yes, I was male-centered. I was way more focused on getting noticed and feeling seen than I was in sometimes building healthy connections with my friends, or sometimes I would risk healthy connection with my friends because of men. Yes, I was in a romantic connection with a man who was giving me all the things that I said that I wanted, but I wasn't able to receive that, and I took him for granted, and I kept leaving and coming back, and that is very harmful. And I wasn't thinking about his emotional safety or his feelings or his heart. I can acknowledge and say that I did those things without calling myself stupid or just like different things to say about yourself that are just unkind. So definitely, if you find yourself reflecting back on past situations, pay attention to how you are describing your younger self. And if it's very harsh, I think you should try to understand, is this my language, or is this language that I've learned from other people? And what are ways that I can take accountability without having harmful or rude language about myself? Ruminating is a tough one. I don't have a biscuits and strawberry tea today, just water. Ruminating is really easy to do with, if you tend to be an overthinker, or you tend to overanalyze, it can be really easy to just ruminate and pick apart a past situation and just go over and over and over it, over and over again in your head. So what I've tried to do is, when I feel myself ruminating on a certain situation, I just try to give myself an affirmation or something to focus on. Instead of trying to make my brain just stop and be silent, I just give it a positive thing to fill it with. So I say, I was doing the best I could at that time. I love and honor my younger self. I'm grateful for that version of me. I'm grateful that I now have the opportunity to grow. I understand the things that I could have done better, and I understand the patterns of behavior or belief systems that were associated with those choices. I just say things like that to kind of help me through it. I am a firm believer in additional support. So if you are having these overwhelming feelings of shame and guilt due to behaviors of your younger self, seek therapy if you're able to, from a licensed therapist, of course. Read books on the topics. If you're a religious person, potentially someone at your church. If you're a spiritualist, I would say, I don't know, maybe a Reiki healing session could be really helpful to kind of release that energy and figure out what you're holding on to in your different chakra centers that are related to that younger version of you, and see what comes up. Yeah, and I don't believe we have to beat ourselves up in order to make better decisions. I also think awareness and accountability aren't enough, because humans are naturally drawn to patterns, and so we have to reprogram our minds to acknowledge the decision understand what triggered or why that decision felt normal and felt right. And then we are able to kind of work through and coach ourselves through a new pathway to make a new choice. And it's really important to celebrate when you do make a better choice the next time. If you were put in a similar situation that your younger self would have made a decision that you're not proud of, when you do come in contact with a similar situation and you make a new choice from a new pattern of behavior, from a new outlook on life, you have to celebrate yourself. And I don't know what celebration looks like for you, but sometimes it's just verbal encouragement. I'll literally do a little dance and say, I made a better decision. I made a better decision. And I just say that over and over. Sometimes I do a little dance, or I just give myself credit for the fact that, hey, in the past, I would have did that thing. Or I would have yelled back at that person for being mean to me. Or I would have internalized that person not texting me back, or that person treating me that way to mean that I'm not worthy. But this time I recognize that that's just them and that's their decision. So yeah, celebrate when you make a new decision and when you grow. Because a lot of times when we're younger, especially depending on what dynamics you grew up in, you might have had to parent yourself. You might have had to take on a lot of responsibility and parent your siblings. And so we're all doing the best we can with what we have. And so there is space for self-grace and accountability. There's room for self-love and creating healthy patterns, new patterns. There's room for awareness and acknowledgement and affirmations to help you make better decisions. So I guess the main goal of this video is it doesn't have to be one or the other. You don't have to berate or bully your past self or your younger self, or just lack accountability and make excuses for yourself and blame it all on the things that you've been through. There's a healthy mix, and it's about finding that middle ground. And I think at the root of that is, if you wouldn't say it to someone you love or care about, like a friend or a romantic partner or a stranger, you shouldn't be saying it to yourself. You know, like, don't call yourself an idiot, don't call yourself a dumb, don't say those things about yourself. Because even if you're joking, over time, if you keep saying it, you're gonna believe it. Did you just see that lightning? There's a really bad thunderstorm happening right now. I want you to reflect back on something that you did that you're not proud of and walk through the things that I've talked about in this video. Acknowledge what it is, take accountability that you did it, whether you consciously did it or subconsciously did it because it's just kind of embedded in your decision and patterns. Think about what language you're using to describe that action and describe what you did. Figure out if this is something that you think about all the time or that you've disassociated with. If you hear snoring, it's because Pepper's asleep underneath my desk. Figure out if you're ruminating, if you think about it all the time, if you disassociated and never think about it, but you might still be living and existing in those patterns. Seek out additional support and figure out what triggers that lead up to that decision or that led up to that decision. So that way you can recognize those triggers and begin to work through and walk back before you make a decision that you wouldn't be proud of. And it's also just important to realize that no one's perfect. There's always going to be some area that you will need to grow in. So don't feel pressured to fix this thing and then try to fix everything all at once. I feel like that happened to me when I got in therapy. I kind of just went into this sadness because once I was aware of my behavioral patterns and once I was aware of the damage that I caused to myself and other people, it was really overwhelming. And I felt really sad, and it was kind of hard to see the good things about myself because I was just so aware of everything that I needed to fix and how interconnected and intertwined my childhood was to the decisions that I was making as a young adult in my early 20s and even mid 20s. I feel like my early to mid 20s taught me so much, and now that I'm 27, I feel way more stable and more secure and more confident in myself. But it was rough, and I do feel that people try to glamorize what healing or therapy looks like, and they're like, oh, it's just me and my journal, and on the way I talk to my therapist with my matcha, and this is so cute. And it's not. It sucks to have, you know, for someone who wears glasses, the best way I can put it is like when you take your glasses off to give your eyes a break and you're looking at something, and then you put your glasses back on and you just realize how much you need your glasses because there's no way that that was the object or the book or the word or the screen that you were looking at, because it just looks so different. That is what it's like to heal. It's like there's just things that just seem normal to us and that seem like it makes sense, and then you kind of begin to unlearn things and replace them with more healthier options or more secure and confident options. And when you do that, you realize, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. And it's okay to say I can't believe I did that, because that just means you've grown so much to where you no longer resonate with that choice. But you can choose to not resonate with a choice from your past without being mean or harmful or dismissive of the tools that you had at that time and the understanding and knowledge that you had at that time. Wow, she's really snoring. I wonder if this is gonna come on the video. Nonetheless, I hope you have a good rest of your day or night, and thank you for watching another episode of TaviiTalks.